I never considered myself a superstitious man. Born and raised in New Orleans, I'd heard my fair share of ghost stories, tales of the bayou, whispered warnings about shadowy figures wandering the French Quarter at night. But those were campfire stories, meant to make children shiver. I grew up rolling my eyes at them, telling myself the world was too rational, too mapped out for there to be anything hiding in the dark. That was before I came to Morocco. Before I heard her name for the first time. Before I saw her eyes watching me from across the river. It was my first trip overseas. I'd saved 4 years, working extra shifts at the cafe, managed back home, telling myself that one day I'd finally step foot outside the United States. Europe had been the obvious choice: Paris, London, Rome, but something about Morocco had tugged at me. Maybe it was the photographs, winding Medinas painted in earth tones, mountains fading into the horizon, deserts stretching endlessly under a burning sun. Or maybe it was the sense that this country still held secrets, layers of history folded between mosques, palaces, and ruins that tourists rarely understood. I landed in Marrakesh on a warm afternoon in late spring. The air smelled of dust, spices, and something faintly metallic, like old coins. From the airport taxi window, I watched mopeds swerve between cars, men in jalabas sipping tea at street-side cafes, children darting through alleys with soccer balls. I felt both out of place and exhilarated, like I'd stepped into a dream that moved too quickly for me to catch up. My riad, a traditional Moroccan guest house, was tucked deep inside the old Medina. Getting there felt like threading through a living maze. The driver left me at a gate, and a young man led me on foot through corridors barely wide enough for a donkey cart. The walls were high, painted with fading reds and ochres, and every turn opened into another narrow passage, alive with vendors calling out their wares. When we finally arrived, the riad opened like a secret, a courtyard filled with orange trees, mosaic tiles shimmering under a fountain's trickle, and the faint aroma of mint drifting from the kitchen. That night, exhausted but restless, I ventured outside. The Medina pulsed with life even after dark. Lanterns swung above stalls, piled with leather bags, brass lamps, pyramids of spices in yellows and reds. I let myself wander, half lost, half carried by the tide of voices and laughter. And it was there, in a tiny cafe at the edge of Jemaa El Fna Square, that I first heard her name. The cafe was crowded, smoke from grilled meats and hookah pipes curling in the air. I found a seat beside an older man with sharp cheekbones and a grey beard. He spoke a little English, enough for us to exchange pleasantries. When he learned I was American, traveling alone, he smiled knowingly. "Be careful near rivers," he said, tapping his teacup for emphasis. I laughed. "Why is that?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Aïcha Qandicha." The name rolled off his tongue with weight, like something both feared and respected. I asked him who she was, expecting a story about a thief or bandit. Instead, he told me about a woman, a spirit who lured men to their deaths. "She is very beautiful," he said, his eyes fixed on the steam rising from his tea. "Too beautiful, men follow her, always. They cannot stop themselves. But when they follow, they do not come back. Some say she is a jinn. Some say a witch, always near water, always hungry." The way he spoke made the hair on my arm stand up. He wasn't joking, and he wasn't telling a story for my amusement. This was a warning. I chuckled nervously, trying to play it off. "So she's like a Moroccan mermaid." His expression didn't change. "No, she's death, and she chooses who she wants." That was the first time I heard her name. I didn't know it then, but it wouldn't be the last. The next day, I joined a small tour to the Aicha Valley, a region of rivers and waterfalls about an hour outside Marrakesh. The landscape shifted from the chaotic energy of the city to rolling hills, villages of red clay, and groves of olive trees. The air was cooler there, scented with water and earth. We stopped at a riverbank where locals had built makeshift cafes right on the water. Tables and plastic chairs stood half submerged, so you could dip your feet in the icy stream while sipping mint tea. Children splashed nearby, their laughter echoing against the rocks. It was there, as I sat with my feet in the water, that I saw her. At first, I thought she was just another local woman. She stood on the opposite bank, half in shadow, wearing a white dress that clung to her in the breeze. Her hair was dark, long, tumbling down her back. Even from across the river, I could feel her eyes on me steady, unblinking. I looked away, embarrassed, then looked back. She was gone. For the rest of the day, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it had been a tourist wandering off, or maybe my mind had filled in the shape of someone who wasn't really there. Still, the image lingered in my thoughts. The way she had stood so still, the way her gaze had seemed to direct, to personal. That night at the riad, I dreamed of her. She was standing at the foot of my bed, her hair wet, her eyes glistening in the dark. She whispered something in a language I couldn't understand. When I tried to move, I couldn't. I woke up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat, my pulse hammering in my throat. Over the next few days, I travelled farther Essaouira on the coast, then inland again toward Fes. Each city felt like stepping into another world, the salty wind whipping against the old Portuguese fortress in Essaouira, the labyrinth of tanneries in Fes with their pungent vats of dye. But no matter where I went, she was there. Sometimes just a glimpse, a woman in white turning a corner just as I approached, a reflection in a shop window. Once, in Fes, I saw her in the crowd of the Medina, her face perfectly still, while everyone else pushed and shouted around her. When I blinked, she was gone. I stopped telling myself it was coincidence. A chill followed me everywhere, as if the air thickened whenever she appeared. Sleep became impossible. Every night, the same dream, her standing closer and closer, her lips moving, her voice just out of reach. My body grew heavier each time, like something was pressing me into the mattress. I began to dread the nights more than the days. One evening, desperate for distraction, I asked the riad owner casually about the legend. His smile faded instantly. "You must not say her name here," he said. "It calls her, you understand." I nodded, though I didn't. She's not only story. She chooses. If you see her once, it is accident. Twice, it is warning. 3 times. He didn't finish the sentence. He just looked at me with pity. By then, I had seen her more than 3 times. The breaking point came on my 5th night in Morocco. I had travelled north toward Chefchaouen, the Blue City, perched in the Rif Mountains. It should have been the highlight of my trip, a place I had dreamed of photographing for years. Instead, I spent most of my time glancing over my shoulder, waiting for her to appear. At dusk, I wandered down to a small river at the edge of the town. The water glowed faintly in the fading light, and the sound of it rushing over stones was almost calming. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Then I saw her. She stood across the river, just as she had the first time. White dress, dark hair, stillness that felt unnatural. But this time, she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was slow, deliberate, the kind of smile that says, "I found you." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping on the rocks. My heart thundered in my chest. I wanted to shout, to call for help, but my voice caught in my throat. When I looked again, she was gone, yet the air remained heavy, the silence unnatural. I knew then that the old man in Marrakesh had been right. This wasn't a story. This wasn't a joke. She had chosen me. After that evening by the river in Chefchaouen, I stopped pretending I was imagining her. I knew what I had seen. I knew what I kept seeing. But what unsettled me most wasn't her sudden appearances, it was her gaze. That unwavering stare, as if I were the only person in the world, as if nothing else existed except her eyes fixed on mine. It carried a weight that pressed down on me long after she disappeared. I tried to leave Chefchaouen the next morning, booking a bus south toward Casablanca. The crowded station should have comforted me, families arguing, vendors shouting, children darting between legs, but all I felt was dread. Because in the middle of the chaos, beyond the crowd, she stood watching me again. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just waited. The bus pulled away, but even as the city shrank behind us, I felt certain she was still near. In Casablanca, I searched for answers. Every night was worse than the last. Sleep brought paralysis, the dream vision of her closer, until I could almost feel her breath on my face. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the sound of rushing water echoing in my ears though the room was silent. Desperate, I asked locals again. Most shook their heads, unwilling to discuss her. Some simply walked away. Finally, a shopkeeper whispered that if I wanted the truth, I should visit an old scholar outside the city, a man who studied both religion and folklore. The scholar's home was a modest place on the outskirts, its walls lined with books and faded manuscripts. He was frail, his back bent with age, but his eyes were sharp. When I explained what I had seen, he didn't laugh. He didn't doubt me. Instead, he sighed heavily, as though I had confirmed something he already feared. "You have spoken her name, haven't you?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. He closed his eyes. "Then she has already heard you, and now she follows." He told me what others had only hinted at. Aïcha Qandicha was no simple ghost. Some believed she was once a woman wronged others, a jinn bound to rivers and streams. Her beauty was her weapon, but her hunger was endless. Men who saw her often grew sick, wasting away, as if life itself drained from them. Those who tried to resist her were haunted until they broke. "Is there a way to stop it?" I asked, my voice trembling. The scholar hesitated. "Some say prayer. Some say leaving offerings by the water. But if she has chosen you," he shook his head, "there is no escape. The only safety is distance. Leave Morocco at once." I wanted to believe I could. I told myself I would. But even then, a part of me knew it was already too late. I booked a flight home for 3 days later. Until then, I holed up in a cheap hotel near the coast, avoiding rivers, avoiding eye contact with strangers, trying to stay awake as long as possible. But she found me anyway. The first night, I woke to the sound of dripping water. The bathroom tap was dry, yet the carpet near the window was soaked. Outside, in the dim reflection of the glass, I saw her face hovering just beyond the pane. The second night, she was inside. At least, I think she was. I woke paralyzed again, unable to move or scream. She stood at the foot of my bed, her dress clinging, though soaked through, her eyes gleaming in the dark. Her lips moved, whispering something I couldn't understand. I struggled to breathe, to fight, but the air pressed heavy against my chest. When I finally broke free, gasping, the room was empty, but the sheets were wet, as though someone had dragged them through a river. By the third night, I was losing my mind. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound of water, a dripping faucet, a passing rain shower felt like her calling card. And still, my flight was a day away, the last warning. I returned to the scholar one final time, begging for help. He looked at me with sorrow. "You are already marked," he said. "She will not stop. If you leave, she will follow. If you stay, she will take you. The river is her path. Avoid it, and perhaps you can delay her, but not forever." I asked him what she wanted. His answer chilled me. "She wants you to follow. That is all. Once you do, you belong to her." I left his house trembling. My suitcase was already packed. All I had to do was survive one more night, one more. The final night. It was late when I returned to my hotel, the sound of the ocean faint in the distance. I tried to distract myself with television, with music, with anything that kept me from thinking about her. But as midnight passed, exhaustion weighed on me. My eyelids grew heavy. That was when I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside my door, slow, measured. to deliberate to be another guest. They stopped directly in front of my room. I held my breath. The handle turned once, twice, though the door was locked. Then came a knock, soft at first, then louder. 3 knocks, then silence. I backed away, my heart racing. And then, from the bathroom, came the sound of running water. I turned. The sink was dry, the shower was dry. Yet water poured steadily, echoing against the tiles, and she stepped out. Not from the bathroom door, but from the water itself. It rippled like a curtain, and she emerged taller than I remembered, her white dress clinging, as though she had just risen from a riverbed. Her hair was plastered to her face, dripping onto the floor. I froze. She was beautiful, unbearably so, but behind that beauty was something wrong. Her eyes too dark, her smile too wide. She raised a hand and beckoned me forward. My body moved without my permission. 1 step, then another, as if pulled by invisible strings. "No," I whispered, though the word felt meaningless. She whispered back, her voice a low murmur, like rushing water. I couldn't understand the words, but they filled me with a longing that was both terrifying and irresistible. I stumbled toward her. The carpet beneath my feet grew wet, soaked, until it felt like I was walking through a river. My suitcase tipped over behind me, clothes spilling out, forgotten. She reached out, and I reached back. The moment our hands touched, everything went dark. They never found me. At least, that's what the locals say. A tourist disappeared from a hotel in Casablanca. His belongings left behind, his passport untouched. No sign of forced entry. Only a puddle of water near the bed, seeping into the floorboards. Some whispered he had been taken by thieves, others that he ran away. But those who knew the old stories, the ones who still believed, shook their heads knowingly. They said he had been chosen. They said he had seen her too many times. They said Aïcha Qandicha had claimed another soul. And if you ever visit Morocco, if you ever walk too close to the river at night, perhaps you'll see her too.